5:41 local time, Strait of Hormuz. 3 low contacts push through the radar clutter almost at the same moment. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard USS Abraham Lincoln, no one says a word for 2 full seconds. They do not have to. The tactical display is already speaking for everyone. 3 returns, small, fast, riding so close to the surface that they nearly vanish between sea clutter, commercial traffic, and background noise. Then a 4th contact flashes behind them. A 5th appears even weaker, visible only long enough to raise questions. The track supervisor leans closer to his console. Multiple low contacts bearing 278. Range closing. The atmosphere in the room shifts instantly. Not physically, but operationally. Conversations stop. Chairs turn. Headsets tighten. The carrier is moving through one of the narrowest and most closely watched waterways on the planet. And suddenly, the surface picture no longer looks routine. On Lincoln's bridge, the report arrives calm and precise. CIC reports multiple low, fast returns west of the formation. The captain does not ask for emotion. He asks for numbers. Speed? Variable. Estimated high subsonic on the lead 3. Intermittent on trailing contacts. Altitude extremely low. Sea skimming profile possible. That final word stays in the air for less than a second. Possible. Not confirmed. Not yet. Outside, dawn is still thin over the strait. Tankers move slowly through their lanes. Escorts hold their assigned sectors. The carrier's flight deck is active but not crowded. A normal morning rhythm is underway. Controlled movement, aircraft being towed, deck crews working through routine with one eye on the island. Then the first warning tone moves across the internal nets, and routine ends without anyone needing to announce it. On the starboard side of the formation, one screening destroyer tightens its radar sector and sends a cleaner feedback to the carrier. A second escort reports intermittent contact with the same group from a slightly different angle. The picture begins to form, not clearly, but clearly enough. Something is approaching low. Electronic warfare operators aboard Lincoln begin sorting through the noise. Coastal radar, merchant signals, civilian transponders. Then something else appears. A thin pulse. Brief, narrow. Too weak to classify on the first pass, but out of place for the traffic pattern and out of place for the morning. Possible remote guidance link, one operator says. Another answers quickly. Or drone control, not enough to confirm. The officer in charge cuts through both voices. Keep sorting, don't chase shadows. That is the real challenge now. Not fear, not confusion. Discrimination. In Hormuz, every scope is busy, every mile is crowded, every wrong call carries weight. At 5:42, the lead contact disappears. It drops behind clutter and vanishes from the destroyer's surface picture. 2 seconds later, it returns closer than expected, offset slightly south. Nobody likes what that suggests. Either the track is moving unpredictably, or the formation is losing clean radar continuity at exactly the wrong moment. On the bridge, the captain gives the first real posture order. Set air defense watch, tighten the screen, log everything. No raised voice, no speech, just a clean shift from transit mode to heightened readiness. Across the strike group, the response is immediate. Escorts narrow their sectors and confirm engagement boundaries. A cruiser aft of the carrier refines the shared air picture. Link tracks stabilize, then shake again. The contacts are low enough that every sensor operator has to fight for a clean read. On the flight deck, yellow shirts begin clearing exposed areas. A tow tractor pauses halfway through a move, then continues under a new hand signal. The deck crews no longer look like they are simply working through the morning routine. They look like they remember exactly where they are and exactly what ship they are standing on. Nothing looks theatrical. Everything just becomes faster, sharper, and more deliberate. At 5:43, bridge-to-bridge calls go out across the guard frequencies. Unidentified aircraft or surface-launched contacts west of coalition traffic lanes. This is a United States Navy vessel operating in international waters. Identify immediately. No answer. The call is sent again. Still nothing. Inside CIC, one of the trailing returns brightens for half a second. Its speed curve shifts. Not like drift, not like random movement, like direction. Contact 4 now matching intercept geometry, the tracker says. Projected line carries it deeper into the formation. That gets everyone's attention. The outer escorts are no longer the only concern. The geometry suggests something more serious than a simple pass near the group. This is not just movement across the formation's front. Something is working inward, toward the protected center, toward the carrier itself. A destroyer west of the group makes the first firm assessment. Lead contact profile consistent with inbound ship strike behavior. Not declared hostile, not yet. The line has not been crossed clearly enough, but the wording has changed and everyone in the net understands what that means. At 5:44, another signal cuts through the spectrum, sharper this time. Brief, focused, not civilian. The tactical action officer looks up from his console. We may be looking at a layered approach, small signatures forward, something heavier behind. No one answers. No one has to. The room already knows. On Lincoln's Bridge, the captain watches the horizon through the glass while the carrier holds steady course for 3 more seconds. Then he gives the order that tells the entire strike group the morning routine is finished. Bring the formation to full defensive readiness. In CIC, the air defense coordinator leans into his headset. Stand by for weapons quality track. Then, from the western screen, one escort sends the phrase, "Everyone on the net was hoping not to hear this early." Vampire profile, possible ship strike intent. 5:44 local time. The first interceptor launches from the screening ship in a column of white flame. From the flight deck of USS Abraham Lincoln, it is visible for less than 2 seconds. A hard vertical flash off the port horizon, bright against the early light, then gone into haze and altitude. On the carrier's island, nobody reacts outwardly. They are already buried in the next problem. Inside CIC, the destroyer's voice comes over the net, clipped and exact. Shut out! Track 1 engaged. No celebration? No relief? Not yet. On Lincoln's tactical display, the lead inbound continues for a fraction of a second, then breaks apart into a clean burst of fragmented returns. The interceptor has done its job far enough out to create space. Far enough out to keep the formation protected. But the intercept does not calm the room, it sharpens it. Because the debris field reveals what had been hidden behind the first contact. 2 more returns, lower than the first, now separate from the clutter and hold their lines. One weaves, one stays steady, a third intermittent track flickers between them, weak, small, and difficult to classify. The tactical action officer does not wait. Multiple inbounds remain. This is not a single launch. Across the strike group, the screen tightens again. A cruiser pushes its sector responsibility farther north. A destroyer to starboard shifts radar priority from wide area search to terminal quality tracking. At the center of it all, the carrier continues forward. Massive, controlled, and deliberate, moving through one of the narrowest waterways on Earth, while the outer ring fights to buy time. At 5:45, the second inbound drops even lower. Contact 2 altitude decreasing. A tracker calls out the next update. Possible sea skimmer, speed holding. That is worse. High, fast threats give you geometry. Low, fast threats give you seconds. The destroyer closest to the western threat axis reports a second engagement. Another interceptor leaves its cell and drives into the sky. This one does not climb as high. It angles outward fast, solving low, hunting the line of approach. Lincoln's Bridge receives the update in real time. Second shot away. Defending western sector. The captain keeps his voice steady. Maintain course. Stand by for maneuver. That order matters. In the Strait of Hormuz, a carrier cannot simply turn wide and run from the problem. Commercial lanes, escort positions, shallow water, and the narrow shape of the passage compress every option. Even a small heading change affects the entire formation. On the flight deck, the pace shifts again. Yellow shirts wave aircraft handlers away from one exposed lane. A tow tractor pulls an F/A-18 into a safer position, clear of the catapult track. Chain crews crouch lower. Helmets turn west each time another report comes across the net. Nobody is staring. Everyone is listening. Then the second intercept connects. This one is lower, rougher, closer. Not a distant flash high in open sky, but a sharp white break just above the waterline, followed by burning fragments skipping across the gulf like thrown metal. The escort makes the call. Splash, contact neutralized. Still, there is no sense of relief, because the third contact is still there. The weak return that had been flickering now sharpens and accelerates. Smaller signature. Less predictable track. It shifts just enough to complicate a clean solution. Maybe drone-like. Maybe a decoy. Maybe something designed to hide a heavier threat still sitting behind the raid. Lincoln's electronic warfare team is now seeing what looks like broken command link behavior mixed with surface emissions from the coast. One operator turns toward the supervisor. They may be stacking the approach, cheap front layer, something more serious behind it. Keep working it, the supervisor says. We need certainty, not theory. At 5:46, one of the escorts reports radar saturation. Not a full blackout, not interference strong enough to blind the screen, just enough clutter, timing noise, and overlapping signatures to slow classification by precious seconds. In open ocean, seconds can be managed. In Hormuz, seconds are oxygen. The third inbound now angles across the face of the screen instead of driving straight into the first destroyer's sector. That forces a handoff. One ship had the early look, another has the better firing line. The strike group does not argue. It executes. Shift engagement responsibility. Track 3 to starboard defender. On Lincoln's Bridge, the carrier finally makes its first meaningful course adjustment. Not dramatic, just enough to complicate any targeting solution from shore and stretch the geometry for anything still working toward the center of the formation. Come right, steady and controlled, the captain orders. Do not open the lanes. The helm answers immediately. Inside CIC, the turn redraws the picture. The carrier is no longer presenting the same line to the inbound track. That may help, it may not. Everything now depends on whether the third contact is the real threat or just the object meant to pull attention away from the next launch. Then something gets too close. A forward escort's close-in defense system begins to spool up. Everyone aboard Lincoln who has heard that sound before knows it instantly, even through distance and steel. A rising mechanical scream moving from standby to final guard. It means one thing: something slipped through the outer ring. The burst comes seconds later. A short, ripping roar across the water. Controlled, precise, final. Through optics from the island and several external cameras, sailors on Lincoln see a tiny object break apart into sparks and dark fragments. Some of the debris splashes near the escort's beam. Nothing reaches the carrier. Nothing hits the flight deck. But the distance was close enough to erase any remaining doubt. This is not intimidation. This is a real attempt to reach the formation. And before anyone can fully absorb that, the cruiser south of the carrier sends a fresh warning across the net. New contacts, bearing shifting southeast, different axis, range building fast. The tactical action officer looks at the screen, then toward the bridge circuit. The first wave was not the main strike. It was the setup. Now a second group is coming in from another direction, 5:49 local time. One track ignores the outer escorts completely. It does not drift toward the nearest destroyer. It does not pass harmlessly across the formation's front. It keeps solving inward, cutting through the geometry with the kind of discipline that tells every watchstander in USS Abraham Lincoln's Combat Information Center the same thing at once. This one is hunting the carrier. Track holding centerline bias, the lead tracker says. Projected path now favors Lincoln. No one in CIC reacts visibly. That is what training looks like at this level. Hands move. Voices stay flat. Eyes stay locked on scopes, not faces. But the meaning lands hard. The first wave forced the screen to spend time, angles, and interceptors. Now the second wave is trying to exploit the seams. On the bridge, the report comes up immediately. Captain, inbound profile is no longer screening. It is solving toward the carrier. The answer comes instantly. Bring soft defenses online. Prepare kinetic backup. Keep the screen synchronized. Below the island, across the entire carrier, the shift is felt more than heard. Internal circuits tighten. Damage control lockers stand ready. Flight deck control starts clearing away anything that does not need to remain exposed. Tractors move aircraft out of vulnerable lines. Chain crews drop lower, pulling tie-downs tight enough to keep heavy metal from becoming a hazard if anything gets through. No one runs. Running wastes motion, running spreads fear. The deck works fast and low, the way it has worked in heavy weather and under worse noise than this. On Lincoln's tactical displays, the inbound remains low, fast, and far too close to the waterline for comfort. Another smaller contact moves ahead of it, not on the exact same path, but close enough to split attention. Drone, decoy, leaker. At this point, the label matters less than the effect. The strike group now has to solve two problems at the same time, and one of them is aimed directly at the center of the formation. A cruiser on the southern side takes the first shot. Shooter south, interceptor away. The interceptor rises hard from the southern sector, then angles down toward the outer contact. Everyone in CIC watches the geometry close. For 1 second, it looks clean. Then the small contact shifts. Not enough to escape, just enough to make the intercept messier than anyone wanted. The hit still comes, but later than ideal. A sharp burst flashes low over the Gulf. Burning fragments scatter and skip across the water. Splash one, the cruiser reports. The room still does not relax. The main track is still there. Lincoln's electronic warfare teams release the next layer. Decoys are readied. Soft defense measures begin shaping the battle space, trying to pull the inbound seeker away from its solution. The operators watch for the smallest signs that the deception is working. A drift in track stability, a wobble in heading, a hesitation in the closing line. For 1 second, they get it. Track wandering, one electronic warfare operator says. Possible seeker disruption. Then the symbol steadies again. Negative, it reacquired. That is when the room becomes even quieter. The soft defense layer did not fully break the approach. On the bridge, the captain gives the next order without waiting for a recommendation. Come right 5 degrees. Increase separation from last solution line. Do not outrun the screen. The helm answers. The carrier begins a controlled turn. Massive, deliberate. The kind of movement that would look slow to a civilian, but feels immediate to anyone watching the geometry tighten inside the strait. The escorts adjust with her, careful not to mask one another's sectors or open a gap on the opposite bearing. A destroyer on the new threat axis takes responsibility. Western Defender has engagement doctrine on the primary. Stand by. Inside CIC, the range ticks down. No drama, just numbers running out of patience. At 550, the inbound is close enough that Lincoln's inner defenses matter. Close-in mounts go fully hot. Their sensors stop being background systems and become the final guard. The carrier's own defensive envelope is now part of the fight, not just the outer screen beyond her. Across the ship, sailors who cannot see the tactical displays still feel the change through the metal, through deck vibration, through the pitch of equipment, shifting from readiness to action. On the flight deck, a launch sequence that had been partially staged is frozen in place. Aircrew remain strapped in, engines quiet, waiting on a deck that has suddenly become very still. The aircraft that, 5 minutes earlier, might have become part of the response package is now something else entirely. Fuel, hardware, and exposed weight that the deck crews have to protect right now. Then the destroyer launches. The call comes over the net half a second after the interceptor leaves its cells. Shot out, defending primary inbound. No one relaxes. Everyone knows this is the shot that matters. The interceptor races low, and the entire tactical picture compresses into one brutal equation. Whether their steel reaches the threat before the threat reaches them. For one heartbeat, the two tracks merge on the screen. Nobody in CIC has the answer yet. Then the forward visual camera catches it first. A violent white bloom just above the water, closer than any previous intercept. A flash of orange fragments follows, then a spray column rising almost level with the escort's mast line. The impact is not on the carrier. It is off Lincoln's forward quarter. But it is close enough that everyone aboard understands what it means before the report even arrives. Primary inbound neutralized, the destroyer says. Very close aboard, debris in the water. On the flight deck, several sailors instinctively glance toward the flash. They are corrected immediately. Eyes on your work. That matters too. Discipline after a near miss is part of survival. A few burning fragments hiss into the Gulf. One debris line arcs wider than expected and splashes off the beam of the formation. No hits on the carrier, no topside fires, no loss of mission capability, but now there is no comfortable version of the event left. This was not a probe. This was not background noise. This was a real attempt to reach USS Abraham Lincoln. Inside CIC, the tactical action officer leans toward the strike warfare console. We have enough. Build the launch chain. The captain hears it over the bridge circuit and answers with 4 words. Find where it came from. That is the pivot. The strike group has survived the attempt against the carrier. Now it wants the source. 6:03 local time. Smoke still hangs low over the water west of the formation when the first launch crews step into position on USS Abraham Lincoln's flight deck. The incoming raid is over. The response is not. From the outside, the carrier looks steady again, almost unchanged, still cutting through Hormuz while destroyers and cruisers hold their sectors around her. Inside the ship, everything feels different. Minutes ago, the strike group was fighting to protect itself, sorting contacts, spending interceptors, and keeping a sea-skimming threat away from the center of the formation. Now the same network that defended the carrier is doing something else. It is building a target package. In the Combat Information Center, the tactical display has stopped flashing warnings and started hardening into evidence. Radar tracks from the inbound raid are replayed and overlaid with electronic intercepts, bearing lines, and timing windows. One console reconstructs the flight path of the final inbound. Another maps the delay between the first and second waves. Electronic warfare specialists isolate the signals that appeared just before the raid tightened toward the carrier. A third team compares the pattern against known launch behavior in the region. Possible coastal relay node here, one analyst says, marking a point along the northwestern threat axis. Launcher support farther inland, another adds. Timing fits. No one guesses out loud. No one needs to sound certain before the data is ready. The strike group is built for exactly this moment, when scattered threat reports become a picture, and a picture becomes coordinates. On the bridge, the captain listens as the strike warfare commander lays it out cleanly. Probable launch chain identified. Coastal radar queuing. Remote guidance support. Mobile launch element. At least one command node tied to raid timing. The captain's answer is short. Take it apart. Below, in the ready spaces and across the flight deck, the carrier air wing is already moving. Yellow shirts wave the first aircraft into position. Ordnance crews move under the wings with practiced urgency, not panic. A Super Hornet that had been held in place during the inbound raid is now being turned into part of the response. Another follows. Then comes a Growler, its electronic warfare pods already mounted, built for the kind of mission that begins before the first weapon is released and continues long after the visible part is over. The deck is loud now, but it is not chaotic. Jet wash. hand signals, chains cleared away. Final checks completed behind goggles and cranials. Sailors who, less than 20 minutes earlier, were crouched low while the formation defended itself, are now preparing the aircraft that will remove the source of the threat. That is the reality of a carrier deck. The distance between defense and response can be measured in minutes. At 6:07, the first aircraft is brought to the catapult. The shuttle locks in. The holdback bar takes the strain. Steam pressure builds. From the island, the air boss watches through glass and camera feeds, while the entire strike group keeps its defensive posture around the carrier. The escorts remain ready. Radar sectors stay tight. No one assumes the other side is finished just because the first attempt failed. A follow-on launch is still possible, especially now that the carrier is visibly putting aircraft into the air. That risk shapes every movement. The launch cycle is compressed but not careless. Fighters go first. Electronic warfare support follows. Airborne coordination stays linked to the escort picture below. The package is not built for show. It is built for speed, separation, and precision. Shooter ready! The signal drops. The first Super Hornet disappears off the bow in a wall of steam and engine noise, climbing hard into the morning air. Seconds later, a second aircraft follows. Then another. The Growlers roll next, lifting into the Gulf heat with quiet authority. They are not there to be noticed first. They are there to blind, bend, and break the system still holding the shore-based launch chain together. Inside CIC, controllers watch the air package spread and organize over the strait. Data pours in from every direction. Shipboard sensors, escort tracks, airborne feeds, electronic collection. All of it feeding one shared picture of the battle space. Then one of the suspected coastal emitters comes alive again. Too late. Radar node active, a controller reports. Confirm track handoff to strike package, comes the reply. The response package does not rush blindly toward the signal. It shapes around it. That is the difference. The strike group is not reacting to emotion. It is taking apart a chain. Far from the carrier, the Growlers begin their work first. From Lincoln's deck, none of it is visible, but its effects appear quickly in the reporting stream. The radar node wavers, then spikes, then breaks into scattered emissions. One command link drops, another tries to reroute. A support emitter inland appears briefly, then disappears. They're losing coherence, an electronic warfare officer says. That opens the door. Moments later, the first release authority is granted. The strike aircraft commit. No speeches, no countdowns, just a controlled sequence of calls and confirmations as the package rolls in along planned axes, focusing on the pieces that mattered most in the earlier raid. The coastal queuing site, the launch support element, and the relay point that helped the inbound track hold its line toward the carrier. The first report comes back clean. Target 1 effective. No celebration, then another. Target 2, follow-on reactions observed. That matters. Follow-on reactions mean fuel, stored systems, or launch support equipment. Something important was there. A third node goes dark without clear visual confirmation, likely abandoned or disabled under the combined pressure of electronic disruption and the first wave of precision releases. On the bridge, the captain watches the tactical map become simpler in real time. The threat network that had reached toward Lincoln less than half an hour earlier is beginning to fall apart. Still, the carrier does not loosen its posture. The escorts remain ready on the outer edge. The flight deck keeps one eye on recovery and the other on the western sky. The response package is still airborne. Hormuz is still narrow, merchant traffic is still moving, and a damaged launch network can still create problems if anyone assumes too much, too early. Then the update every ship in the formation has been waiting for moves across the internal net. Launch site degraded, follow-on targets available. That means the first response landed where it needed to. It also means the work is not finished. 6:41 local time. The Strait of Hormuz is still crowded. Tankers continue along their lanes. Escorts keep sweeping their assigned sectors. Radar continues its endless rotation across the horizon. From far away, it might look like just another tense morning in one of the most demanding waterways on Earth. But inside the screens, circuits, and command spaces of USS Abraham Lincoln's strike group, the picture has changed. The chain that reached for the carrier has been broken. Aboard Lincoln, post-strike assessment is already underway. In the Combat Information Center, the same consoles that track the inbound threats now replay the entire sequence in reverse. Not for emotion, not for memory, for confirmation. Bearings, launch intervals, emission spikes, intercept points. The data is layered again and again until the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The first wave had pushed the screen wide, the second had tried to cut inward. The response package had found the links that made that move possible. One by one, the suspected launch support nodes along the western threat axis have gone quiet. A coastal radar queuing site is no longer emitting. A relay point that briefly supported the second wave has vanished from the spectrum. Follow-on surveillance shows disturbed ground, heat bloom, and scattered signatures where a mobile support element had been operating less than an hour earlier. No one in CIC calls it revenge. They call it degradation. That is the word that matters at sea. Not emotion, not rhetoric, capability reduced, network disrupted. The next attempt made harder. On the flight deck, the tempo shifts again. The raw urgency of the engagement has passed, but the deck is not relaxed. There is no cheering, no crowd gathering near the island. The aircraft that launched in response are now part of a recovery cycle, and that recovery has to be clean. Because in waters like these, one fight ending does not mean the next one is not already forming somewhere beyond the horizon. Yellow shirts reset the launch area, green shirts service equipment. Plane captains wait near their aircraft with that unmistakable carrier deck posture, half stillness, half readiness. A Hornet rolls back into position, carrying soot and salt, looking less like a symbol and more like what it truly is. A machine back from one task. Nearby, another jet is already being inspected for the next one. That is how mornings like this work. Endure the attempt, break the source, reset, stay ready. On the bridge, the captain remains near the same position he held when the first low contacts pushed through the clutter. The view ahead looks calmer now, but no one calls it safe. In Hormuz, commanders do not use that word casually. The formation has been restored, but the escorts remain spread and alert, still covering angles, still holding their sectors, still prepared to answer if another low, fast track appears over the Gulf. West of the carrier, a destroyer reports no new launches. Farther south, a cruiser confirms the same. Then an airborne controller sends another update from the returning response package. Additional assessment indicators suggest the command element connected to the raid timing is no longer working normally. Communications attempts appear broken, delayed, rerouted, and then lost. For the next ship passing through the strait today, that may matter more than anything else. Lincoln took no direct hit. That matters too. But the more honest measure is not simply that the carrier came through untouched. It is how close the situation came to becoming something far worse. Across the group, sailors have already reviewed the footage of the closest intercept, a white flash just above the waterline off the forward quarter, close enough to remove any doubt about intent. On another morning, with one extra delay, that geometry could have ended differently. No one spends long saying that out loud. Professional crews do not live inside alternate endings. They record them, learn from them, and return to the work. At 6:48, the tactical summary is read across the command net. It is brief, cold, and complete. Initial low contacts, first confirmed hostile profile, outer screen engagement, second axis raid, one primary track solving toward the carrier, close range intercept, launch chain identified, response package launched, threat network degraded. No flourish, no speech, just the event reduced to its working parts. Outside, Lincoln continues through the strait on the same mission path it was following before the first warning appeared. That is part of the message, maybe the clearest part. The carrier did not stop. It did not abandon the transit. It did not surrender the waterway to the people who tried to reach it. It absorbed the pressure, held formation, and kept moving. For the Houthis, or for whoever helped build the chain behind that morning's attempt, that is the worst possible outcome. Not only that the carrier remained intact, not only that the strike group answered, but that the formation stayed operational, stayed disciplined, and stayed on mission after the attempt failed. In the end, that is what carrier warfare looks like in a place like Hormuz. Not speeches, not panic, not cinematic victory laps. Just steel, timing, procedure, and a sudden contest of decisions where the side that miscalculates is left with fewer options than it had an hour before. At 6:52 local time, USS Abraham Lincoln pushes ahead through the strait, escorts back in full defensive geometry, radars sweeping clean arcs across crowded water. Behind the formation, somewhere beyond the western haze, the launch network that tried to reach the carrier is now disrupted, disabled, or silent. The attempt lasted minutes. The answer lasted longer. And in Hormuz, that is often how you know who made the bigger mistake.